The 2025 season for the Atlanta Braves is over, but for the front office, the work is just getting started. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today for Monday, September 29th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. This is both a podcast and a newsletter. And now that the season is finished, Braves beat the Pirates on Sunday. Fantastic way to kind of send off Charlie Morton. He starts the first inning. He gets a strikeout to open the second. They go ahead and they go out. They get him, gives him a chance. The fans can cheer for him and everything. The umpires stop the pitch clock at that time to let the pitching change happen. His family's on the, right there on the dirt by the dugout. He gets to hug his family and all of that. Fantastic moment for Charlie Morton. Couldn't be happier with the way that he got to go out, especially as we talked about last week, especially when a lot of guys didn't get that. Right? Craig Kimbrell didn't even get to pitch back in Atlanta. Never mind get the send-off like that. Correction, he did pitch back in Atlanta just as a member of the Astros. Anyway, point is, but the season's now over. And there's a lot of stuff for Atlanta to do this winter. And this is not the free agent show. We're going to do the free agent show. We're going to do a lot of free agent shows, talking about different options. I honestly don't know how much Atlanta's going to spend. Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Snitker are going to talk to the media in a couple days. They always do it a couple days after the season ends. They sit down with the media and they talk and take questions, and that's where a lot of this stuff starts to come out. But what I want to talk about is outside of free agency, what are the other things Atlanta needs to do? Because there's a lot of decisions coming, and the first ones are due in like a month. There's not a lot of time between now and when Atlanta's front office has to get to work. They're going to start meeting with the coaching staff, having the exit interviews with the players before they leave, having the organizational meetings, and getting an attack plan because in a couple weeks, everything is going. The first deadline is 5 days after the end of the World Series. So if the World Series ends on a Sunday, then I'm talking about Thursday. That Thursday at 5 p.m., so 5 p.m. on the 5th day after the World Series, is when some notable decisions have to be made. And decision number one is what to do with all of your player options. To do all your club options, and they have a player option as well. So Atlanta has 5 decisions that need to be made. 4 of them by the team, 1 of them by the player. Club options. They have an $18 million club option on Chris Sale. No buyout on that. That's 99.9% likely to get picked up, pretty much unless he says he's retiring. Ozzie Albies, $7 million club option, $4 million buyout. We've talked about this numerous times before. Even if they don't intend for him to be a starter in 2026, which they've given no indication of that. But even if that's not their intention, $3 million gets you virtually nothing. The point of doing efforts to save $3 million isn't really worth it. So they'll bring Ozzie back as well. Pierce Johnson, $7 million with no buyout. And Tyler Kinley is $5.5 million with a $750,000 buyout. I honestly, my initial reaction is to say all 4 of those guys come back. There is a world where Atlanta holds off on 1 of those, or maybe even 2 of those. I do think there is a possibility, given that you have some other arbitration eligible pitchers with varying levels of confidence, right? You don't have a lot of confidence in Alexis Diaz. I feel like we probably have more confidence in Joel Payamps and what he's done in the last couple appearances here. It is possible that you see Atlanta move on from some guys. Now, I don't think that Pierce Johnson or Tyler Kinley would just be allowed to walk to free agency. I do feel like they have enough residual value where Atlanta could make a deal and move one of them if they wanted to. I don't think they will. I do think it's very likely, if I had to predict right now, going into next season, what your bullpen looks like, I think your setup is like Joe Jimenez and Dylan Lee, a lefty and a righty. And then you've got Tyler Kinley, Pierce Johnson, maybe Dylan Dodd, Joel Payamps as like 6. And then you've got to add a long man, probably Joey Wentz, and a closer. Could be Raisel Iglesias, could be Ronaldo Lopez. I think that kind of depends on where they want to spend the money this winter and who they prioritize acquiring. Do they acquire a starter and use Lopez in the rotation? Do they acquire a starter and use Lopez in the pen? Do they acquire a closer and use Lopez in the rotation? But that's kind of where I am as of now, is that's without a bunch of additions, that's likely your pen. So do they say, hey, because we have a Grant Holmes we have to do something with, assuming that he does successfully come back from the partially torn UCL? Do they say we need to trade a guy out of this pen? If so, maybe they pick up and then trade a Pierce Johnson or a Tyler Kinley. We're going to get at this in a little bit. Maybe they trade Aaron Bummer. He's owed $9.5 million on the escalator in his contract. And is it a great value? I don't think so. Maybe they try to package him in a deal. I'm getting ahead of myself. But those are the 4 club option decisions. Those are arguably the first roster decisions that Atlanta has to make. You're picking up Sale. You're picking up Ozzie. You're likely picking up Pierce Johnson and Tyler Kinley. The other option Atlanta needs to figure out is Ha-Seong Kim. And this is not Atlanta's decision to make. Ha-Seong Kim makes this decision. It's a player option for $16 million. This is a thing this is unfamiliar territory for the Braves. Alex Anthopoulos in Atlanta doesn't give out player options. He doesn't give out vesting options. He doesn't give out deferred money. He doesn't give out no trade clauses. He doesn't give out player opt-outs. Like, these are all different just contract clauses that he's not interested in doing, and Atlanta does not give to their free agents. So this is a new world for the Braves, where they have to wait on Ha-Seong Kim to make his decision on what he wants to do. Again, $16 million club option for Kim. He, in his time with the Braves, same number of games as when he was with Tampa. He hit .253 with a .316 on base and a .368 slug. Comes out to a 95 WRC plus. Slightly below average. Average is 100. Slightly below his numbers. He's been like a 101, a 110 in his career. His defense is also slightly negative as compared to his previous seasons when he was a Gold Glove winner utility man in 2023. And then he played shortstop almost full-time in 24 before the injury. So there's a couple arguments there for Ha-Seong Kim is going to come or should pick up his option and come back to Atlanta. There's a couple arguments against doing that as well. The first one is that, we've talked about it before, this free agency class is incredibly weak. You have Bo Bichette, who hit like 300 this year, is a very, very good hitter, but is on the injured list with yet another lower body injury. He's had multiple lower body injuries in the last few seasons. And when he was on the field, graded out as the worst defensive shortstop in baseball. But of all qualified defenders, he was the worst. Like, he's not Vaughn Grissom bad, but he's like that direction. And then everybody else on the market is a decent defender that is offensively challenged. They're just Nick Allen with a couple points taken away from defense and put in the offense. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is not a threat at the plate. Miguel Rojas isn't really a threat at the plate. Orlando Arce is one of the better options in this class, if that tells you anything, for shortstop options. And you have to remember, Ha-Seong Kim changed agents to go to Scott Boras. Typically, guys don't choose to go to Scott Boras if they're not interested in maximizing their money in free agency. So Atlanta, if they find out that Kim wants to elect free agency, and again, they don't have to find out until 5 p.m. of the 5th day after the World Series. He'll likely tell them ahead of time, but that's when the decision's due. And Atlanta doesn't transmit their decisions until like the last minute, simply because they don't want to pick it up tomorrow and then Chris Sale get hit by a bus, right? Fall off a bike again and break something. But they've got to resolve those 5 decisions. They've got to figure out what's going to happen. And are you going to have Kim? If Kim opts out, or if any of those players, even if they do want to pick up the option, Atlanta can go and negotiate with any of those players or any of their own free agents exclusively between now and when they officially become free agents. They officially become free agents the day after the World Series, but they can't sign with another team until that same 5 p.m. deadline. Everything happens at the same time. Your option decisions are due. Players officially have the ability to sign. They become free agents the day after the World Series, according to the MLBPA, but they can't sign until the 5th day. So that's your first major deadline. That you also have exclusive negotiating rights with any of your own free agents, right? Sandy Leon, Raisel Iglesias, Marcell Ozuna. Technically, Charlie Morton's a free agent. Again, I think he's gone, but technically a free agent. So the first date you need to know is the 5th day after the World Series. That is when a lot of this stuff has to happen. Okay? Moving on from that, around that same time, but usually a little bit later, it was a couple days later last year, is the next big decision date Atlanta has. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about the second decision day. And it's not a firm deadline, but it's around that same time. You have to take all of your injured players off of the 60 and 15-day ILs. 15-day IL, not a big deal. You just put them back on the regular roster, 10 or 15, depending on if they're pitchers or hitters. But the 60-day IL spot, you have to make a 40-man spot for every guy of those that you are keeping. We talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago, right? I mentioned there was like 47 guys on the 50-man roster. Right now, it's 51 players on the 40-man roster. The Braves have been very aggressive about moving guys to the 60-day IL so they can make some claims. And some of these were very good claims, right? Alek Manoah, formerly of the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm thinking that's going to end up being tomorrow's show. I should have access by the time this goes up to the AAA data set to kind of download what did he actually do from a pitch perspective after he was done rehabbing. Let's dive into that. Let's look at his contract. How can he come back? All of that good stuff. So we'll talk about that, I'm guessing, in tomorrow's show, a deep dive into Alek Manoah. But they claimed him. They claimed Joel Pyomps. They claimed catcher Chucky Robinson from the Los Angeles Dodgers. They claimed Carson Ragsdale, I believe it was off the Orioles, but then they DFA'd him 5 days later to make room for Joel Pyomps and Charlie Morton. And then Ragsdale went back to the Orioles. He was claimed off the waivers back by the Orioles again, so he just bounced back and forth. But they've been really aggressive with grabbing guys, throwing them to the 60-day to make a 40-man spot and making a waiver claim. And some of those guys are going to come back. Like Joel Pyomps looks like he's part of this bullpen next year. Alexis Diaz, probably not. But because of that, a lot of players. Now, you're going to clear a few spots. You're going to clear 4 spots in Iglesias, Ozuna, Morton, and Leon. You still have to make 7 spots just to bring everybody back off the 60-day IL. And there's nobody on the 60-day IL that is a slam dunk, we're getting rid of this guy. Every single one of them is going to be around, except for maybe Jake Fraley. The outfielder, he's the only one where it's an open question, would they keep Jake Fraley or would they get rid of him or not? But Austin Riley, Sean Murphy, even if you think that Atlanta should trade Sean Murphy, you got to take him off the 60-day IL first. AJ Smith-Shawver coming back. Spencer Schwellenbach, Ronaldo Lopez, Joe Jimenez, Deisabel Hernandez, Aaron Bummer. Again, maybe you trade Aaron Bummer. Got to take him off the 60-day first. And to answer the question somebody had about AJ Smith-Shawver, this came up, maybe it was on social media. He's going to start 2026 on the 60-day IL. But he has to come off over the course of the winter, and he uses a 40-man spot. If you, and you're not going to do this with him, but Atlanta's done this with guys before, if you DFA him and nobody claims him off waivers, you can sign him to a minor league deal and keep him in the organization. They did that with Ray Kerr. Ray Kerr got hurt last year. They were trying to convert him into a starter, and his stuff was great, but the results were kind of iffy. Then he tore his UCL. He had Tommy John. They waived him, or DFA'd him technically. He passed through waivers, and they added him back to the organization on a minor league deal. So he's still with the organization, but not using a spot. Those are your two options to get a guy who is currently on the 60-day IL through the winter in the organization so that you can put him back on the 60-day IL in the spring. You can't put a player back on the 60-day IL until players have reported. That player has to report to spring training, whether it's with pitchers and catchers or with everybody else. Now, at that point, you can place them on the 60-day IL if there's a corresponding move. You don't put guys on 60-day IL just to do it. There has to be a corresponding move. So you need a 40-man spot. You want to grab a guy, you want to sign a free agent. The corresponding move is to put your player on the 60-day IL, and the 60 days doesn't start until opening day. This, even if you put them on it in February, the actual count of the 60 days does not start until opening day. Because if not, if a guy was going to miss a week of the season, you could throw him on there in February, in like the very beginning of February, and bring him back the very beginning of April. It's not how it works. It's only active days of the season that are counted. 60 days. So AJ Smith-Shawver is going to get placed on the 60-day IL some point in time in spring training. They'll get that 40-man spot back at that time, but not until then. Anyway, kind of digress there. So they have to make a bunch of spots. Now, there's players at every position group that you can clearly see going, right? You look at the outfield group. Jared Kelenic is 99.99% gone. He is out of here, okay? Very, very unlikely that they keep him. You look at the infield group. Luke Williams is likely gone. Brett Wisely might be gone. Vidal Brujan, we don't know. He might be gone. He might not. We don't know. Obviously, you're going to clear DH. But pitchers, where a lot of these are going to come from. You have 30 pitchers on your 40-day IL right now. A lot of teams end up having this number be somewhere 24, 25, 26, depending on how heavily they platoon and their prospect distribution at the major league level. And at the AAA level. So Atlanta's got too many pitchers. And you're going to clear a spot for two, Iglesias and Morton. But you're going to see them make some more. There's a couple guys they may try to squeeze through waivers and see if they can retain them, like an Austin Cox, maybe a Nathan Wiles, a guy that Jose Suarez, maybe they try to DFA him and then add him on a minor league deal and tell him we're going to invite you to spring training. And then hopefully, if he plays good enough, he can make the team, they add him back to the 40-man roster. Who knows? But you're going to see probably most of the losses come out of that group. It's just not sustainable to keep 30 pitchers on a 40-man roster because literally you barely have enough other players to field a team. So look for that number to come from 30 down to 23, 24, something like that. Okay? One of the ways Atlanta could make some space, and we'll see if this is something they try to do again. It's not as common as we feel like it is. There's just a very notable example where it happened for Atlanta, is making a package trade, which is where they just group together a bunch of guys who are all non-tender candidates, out of options, that kind of stuff, and send them to another team, usually a non-contending team who is rebuilding and just looking to accumulate major league talent in return for taking on a salary or something like that. The Braves did this in 2023, November 2023. They got Aaron Bummer from the White Sox. And the return was minor leaguer Riley Goins, who actually hasn't been bad for Chicago. He had a 3.84 ERA last year between high A and double A. and a 334 all in 27 starts with Double-A Birmingham this year, 151 strikeouts and 132 innings. He's not been terrible, but he just wasn't in Atlanta's plans. So they traded Riley Goins, Nicky Lopez, Braden Shoemake, Jared Schuster, Michael Soroka. Those 5 players, they traded all 5 of them to the Chicago White Sox. So 4 players who were on the 40-man roster, because Goins was not, and they got 1 back. So they cleared 3 40-man spots that way. It's entirely possible you see something like that this year. And I would imagine, I honestly can't imagine anybody wanting Jared Kelenic, but you could potentially see something like Jake Fraley, Vidal Brujan, maybe, depending on the guy you're trying to acquire, maybe even somebody with value like a Nacho Alvarez, right? A Nathan Wiles, maybe, again, I don't think they should, but maybe even a guy like a Bryce Elder, depending on who they're trying to acquire, to get 1 guy back. Clears you a couple spots and gets you a piece back to add to your team. You may see something like that this winter. But again, reminder, the deadline to get these guys off the 60-day IL and back to the 40-man roster is right there around the same time you have to make your decisions. And you can't sign a free agent. If I understand this correctly, you cannot sign a free agent until you do this. You have to be at 40 men on your 40-man roster before you can start with your off-season free agency signings, I believe. Not 100% sure on that. I've actually reached out for clarification on that, but I believe that's the rule. So that's why you always see it happen around the time of free agency starting. I do believe you can re-sign your own because they're already using a spot, but you can't give a new guy a spot. So like last year, we brought back was it Johnson got the extension? Yeah, and then we gave Bummer a new deal, or we gave Lopez a new deal. And we did that during the playoffs because they were already on the 40-man roster. But you can't add new free agents from outside. There's another big thing coming up this winter that Atlanta has to do by a deadline, and a huge decision that we're still waiting on. We'll talk about both of those next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about 2 things that are going to happen after that before the end of the year, okay? Thing number 1 is going to be your Rule 5 protection decisions. These are all due in November. Reminder here, the Rule 5 draft is where a team can pay $100,000 to draft a player from your minor leagues who is Rule 5 eligible. And I'll get to that eligibility in a second. And when they select them in the major league portion of the Rule 5 draft, they're required to put that player not only on their 40-man roster, but on their 26-man Major League Baseball roster. That player's supposed to break camp out of spring on the roster and stay on their roster all year. There's a little bit of wiggle room for like IL stints, but the guy can't be on the full season IL and count. He has to be on your active roster for a certain number of those days and on the IL the rest. But the point is, he has to be in the major leagues all year. If you can do that, you keep him in his rights. If you can't keep him on the major league roster, either you need to give him back in spring training, he's not going to make your team, or during the season, you have to DFA him or option him or whatever. You then turn around and offer him back to the original organization at half of that $100,000 fee, so $50,000. And the eligibility rules on this, there's a new wave of prospects roll into Rule 5 eligibility every winter because this is based off of the age you were when you first signed your professional baseball contract. So if the player was 18 or younger at signing, which is typically an international free agent, or a player you draft out of high school in the MLB draft, 18 or younger, it's 5 seasons before they become Rule 5 eligible. So anybody that you did in 2021 out of high school, 18 or younger, or international free agents from that year, this is the winter where they become Rule 5 eligible. 21 through 25 is 5 years. If they signed at age 19 or older, it's 4 seasons. So that's the 2022 MLB draft. And this is where Sometimes you hear them talk about a prep player who is young or old for his class. If you've already passed, if you're like getting to 19 when you're getting out of high school because you were held back or something or whatever, there's one state with like a weird age thing, you might as well just go to college because they're not going to draft you with the development curve of a prep player, but the Rule 5 curve of a college player. Not important. Anyway, point is, 2022 draftees have to be protected. And the way you protect them is you add them to your 40-man roster. So they've already gotten a head start on this, right? Hayden Harris, Giancarlo Lara. Those were two of the three big names that were going to be Rule 5 eligible for Atlanta this winter. Obviously, both of those guys have already been added to the Major League roster. To the 40-man roster. Both of them were called up. Hayden Harris has actually gotten a chance to pitch in the majors. Giancarlo Lara famously did not. But they're on the 40-man roster. They are protected. They are ineligible to be drafted in the Rule 5 draft. The third guy is Blake Burkhalter. Compensatory pick in 2022 out of Auburn. He's a starter. He was a starter this year. They moved him to relief in late July just to manage his innings. He went 4-7 with a 3.32 ERA across AA Columbus and AAA Gwinnett. And as a starter, exclusively as a starter, he had a 3.18 ERA with 2 homers allowed in 82 innings. So promising dude. He's in the organization's top prospects. He's going to be protected this winter. But after that, there's a couple guys that probably should be protected, but can Atlanta make enough 40-man spots to protect them? David McCabe, 4th rounder in 2022. He lost, in essence, almost like a whole season because he had Tommy John. He's more of a first baseman than a third baseman. From a defensive perspective, he's just not good at third. But this year, 105 games in AA, he hit 286 with a 434 slug, only 10 homers. He hit another 4 homers in 28 games in Gwinnett. So his overall line in 133 games is 14 homers, 71 RBI, 275 with a 794 OPS. It's an atypical profile for the corner infield because you heard the home run number was 14. In 2023 in single A and high A, he hit 17 home runs. He's not a massive power guy. So a little bit of an atypical profile. And again, there's defensive questions about him being able to play third base decently enough to play in the majors. He looks like a first baseman DH to me. But also, he hit 286 with a 380 on base. Like, he looked really good. I think it's a question, if they have space, they probably protect him. They may not. I don't know. Ian Meha is another guy where, I'm probably saying that wrong, by the way. I'm sure I am. Where 11th rounder in 2022 at New Mexico State. I'm assuming he doesn't get protected. 25 appearances this year, 18 of those were starts, 2.67 ERA between almost entirely in AA Columbus. Right? So 131 in the third innings, only 109 strikeouts, but an ERA under 3. It's kind of the profile of a team of something where a team would pick him up if they can get him in the minor league portion of the draft and keep him. I ultimately don't know if he's major league caliber for the Braves, but if somebody can take him in the minor league portion, they might do it. You've got guys like Boris Tavares aren't going to be protected. EJ Exposito, not going to be protected. But all those decisions are due in late November. The Rule 5 draft happens at the winter meetings, which is mid-December. So you have to make 40-man spots for all of those guys. I really think the only one that Atlanta's going to protect out of this entire group is probably Burkhalter. The other decision that you have to come to, and you obviously need his help, and I think we'll find out more within a couple weeks, is manager. Brian Snitker doesn't really sound like he's retiring. A lot of the conversation recently, and he talked about this in early September. We talked about it on the show. A lot of the conversation from Brian Snitker has been like what ifs. He's been talking about like what would have happened if the team didn't have all these pitching injuries, right? Or that full lineup that they first got in like July the one with Profar and Acuna and Riley in it. What if they had had that lineup all season, right? What would that lineup have done with that pitching staff? It kind of sounds like he's thinking about coming back. And he said on Sunday, quote, "I've teetered on the fence." He did admit that that conversation with the team on his future has not happened. Quote, "I haven't approached them. We're going to talk this week. That's kind of where I wanted it to go. That's on me." He wanted to wait till after the season. He's going to talk to his wife and his family and decide what he wants to do, and then he's going to talk to the organization. I'm honestly at the point where I feel like if he wants to come back, they're going to let him come back. I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but I feel like that's where we are. Because you can tell he's not happy with the way the season ended, and obviously, I mean, none of us are. The Atlanta Braves are not in the postseason for the first time since like 2017, which is the last time they had a losing record. It was his first full season as manager. They were 72-90 that year. But does he want to come back for his 50th year in the organization, like age 70, with everybody knowing it's his final season? Because you're going to see all the pomp and circumstance. Every road trip, it's the last time in that city. They're going to do something to honor Snit, and he's going to have to come out of the dugout and shake somebody's hand and take a photo and get a gift or something. Happened to Miguel Cabrera. It happened to Albert Pujols. It's happened to managers. We just don't think about it because they're managers and not players. But he's well liked around the game. His peers, the coaches, all like him. So if he comes back for one more season, I do think Atlanta would make it clear to all of us that this is his last season. And I do think he wouldn't be able to get away from all of that stuff, right? He wouldn't be able to get away from all of the pomp and circumstance. And I genuinely don't know how I'm going to feel about it. He's not the reason that Atlanta finished the year 10 games under 500. But at the same time, he wasn't able to make enough correct strategic decisions to keep them from ending up 10 games under 500, if that makes sense. It ultimately comes back on the players. But when you look at some of the areas where Atlanta struggled so much, like one-run games, we talked about this a little bit on the postcast yesterday. 83 wins was enough to get in the postseason in the National League. Atlanta finished with 76. So they were 7 games short. They were 21-35 in one-run games. They played 56 one-run games, and they won 37.5% of them. If they were just 500 in one-run games, that's 28-28. That's 7 more wins. They have the tiebreaker over both the Reds and the Mets. If Atlanta was just even in one-run games, they're in the postseason right now, and they're playing tomorrow. And while the manager is not the reason the offense struggled for so long or all of that, the decisions that I feel like he wasn't the best at, like scripting the bullpen versus going with maybe who would have been the exact best person at that time, inning and roll be damned. Those are the kind of things that can make you drop a game here, drop a game there. And all of that, could that add up to 7 runs over the course of 7 games over the course of a season? Maybe. And a little bit of that, there's blame on the front office for not adding enough relief help. There's Jurickson Profar gets blamed for getting popped for 80 games for PEDs. Like, there's a bunch of blame to go around. But it's like, I do think this is a perfect storm this year of underperformance, the suspension, the bad one-run performance, and then the injuries. But if you take any one of those things out, could you see a path where Atlanta wins 7 more games and is in the postseason? You could. And if he feels the same way, hey, there's no way that all of this stuff happens again, right? If he sees that, it's entirely possible. He says, yeah, I'm going to come back. We're going to give it one last shot. It's my 50th year in the organization. As the manager, the coaching staff is likely intact. They're bringing back Tim Hires. They're bringing back Rick Kranitz and everybody else. I do wonder if Freddie Gonzalez would stick around at third base or if they'd go find a new one. I don't know. But we'll find out in probably a week or two. I feel like at this point, I feel like he's coming back just from listening to him talk in the last couple weeks. He's probably coming back. We don't know for a fact. I'll talk about it the other way when it happens. We'll talk about the pros and cons. We'll talk about if he does, if he doesn't, whatever happens, we'll discuss it. But either way, the Braves have a lot of work to do over the offseason. We do too. We're not going away. Okay. Braves Today is going to be here almost every single day from now until spring training. We'll obviously have a little bit of time off, right? I'm not going to do a show on Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. I've got a medical procedure coming up in a couple weeks. I'll take a Friday off there and all that good stuff. But for the most part, we're going to be here just about every day between now and spring training. So do me a favor. If you're listening on audio, leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to leave some nice words in your review, always love reading those. Kind of give me a little bit of a chuckle there. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, because we're going to do as much stuff as I can think about. Like, we're going to talk about expansion, how that would impact the Braves, how it worked the last time. We have a bunch of guests I'm trying to get on for different things, whether it's members of the broadcast team, journalists, former players. I have a whole list I've been working on this last week of the season. So going to get all this stuff coming for you. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.